that Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to Times Square, ladies and gentlemen. Kevin McCullough, very glad to have you with us, and I'm very excited to have my next guest back. She is one of the most favorite doctors in all of America, as her former moniker indicated, America's favorite doctor. Now she's the director of Swell MD. Please put your hands together and welcome Dr. Laura Purdy. Hello, lady.
Hi, everybody. Hey, thanks for having me back, Kevin. It's great to see you today.
And I'm not playing around with her name. I'm not being cute. It's actually P-U-R-D-Y, but she is awful purdy as well. So it's fun to have you back.
Thank you.
The Wall Street Journal has just published a pretty interesting piece where they talked to 45 lawmakers and administration officials. These are people that are in the executive branch if they're an administration official. And they talked to 45 of them, and they've asked each of them over the last 12 months, has your interaction with the president seemed to change? Has he seemed different in how in your meetings and so forth? And from Democrats and Republicans, kind of people on both sides, they're saying that there is some noticeable cognitive stuff going on. He talks sometimes very slowly and quietly in some meetings. Other meetings, he seems to be like peppier than normal and way too up. And then there's times where he will close his eyes for long extended periods, forgets where he's at, uses notes to make sure that he does the points that he's trying to. And other times he'll be like he was 20 years ago and kind of not even a hint of anything. So the words cognitive decline are bantied around on the news a lot now, but I was thinking it must be difficult if you're dealing with a parent or a boss or someone that's in your life and you begin to see some of these things. So I wanted to ask you, from a wellness perspective, Dr. Laura Purdy, when you hear those words, maybe in a family medical appointment or whatever, what should you begin to think about? What do you have to start doing from a family perspective to prepare for that?
Well, this is a hot topic, and definitely something I know quite a bit about, taking care of, older veterans and retirees who stay in the military system. We see a lot of this, especially in the family members of the aging population. And I think the first thing to know is that it is a grieving process. So when someone in a family goes through cognitive decline, it impacts, some people say it marks the beginning of the end. Some people say that it marks the beginning of the grieving process of that person in your life. And another thing that's really important to remember is that this is a medical condition. It might be on a spectrum, and maybe it's a symptom. You can have cognitive decline in all kinds of diagnoses, or you can just have it from age, right? We all will eventually cognitively decline. So my advice to folks is always seek attention sooner rather than later from a qualified professional, as opposed to going online and looking for advice, because it is a real medical condition and there are real constraints. And second of all, acknowledge, as soon as you can acknowledge that you have a process to go through in this as well as the family member, the better, right? Because that's really important. And the third thing I will say is just to kind of shift the perspective a little bit, because when you are an adult who is undergoing cognitive decline, there's almost always, unless there's a very profound dementia, there's almost always an awareness of something's not right. I know I'm not myself. I don't know what to do about it. And that does pop up in those lucid intervals. And the problem is that in order to have that person start modifying their activities, like maybe working less or not working at all, or not driving, or not caring for themselves, cooking using stoves and things like that, is they do, right, wrong, or indifferent, they do retain their autonomous decision making for a pretty long time. It takes a lot to say to anybody, and I assume even the president of the United States, your medical condition now prevents you from being able to participate in your own life. So there's always a lot of opinions at the table anytime this happens to someone. And I don't think it's about right or wrong, but it is more about understanding it's a process, it's a condition. And to truly strip away rights and civil liberties of someone who has cognitive decline is a really big deal and shouldn't be taken lightly.
Well, it is something that I have a little bit of experience with myself. I had a grandmother that I deeply loved who went through a long arc of decline, and it was not super obvious at the time. And we're talking 30 years ago. So it was at a time when we didn't know as much as we do now in terms of some of the signs and some of the things to watch for. But Laura, sometimes things will come out in a very strange way. They may put clothes on in an awkward fashion, undergarments on top of outer garments, that type of thing. Or there may be conversations that they have that they just had with you that they don't remember having had with you. One of the things that the Wall Street Journal article said about the President Biden situation is that when Kevin McCarthy had been the Speaker of the House, that they had had 2 meetings on a specific topic. And when he came back to the third one, after having gone over the details in 2 previous meetings exhaustively, it was as though they'd never had them. And I can only imagine if it's jarring in the workplace that sometimes that stuff happening, particularly in the family relationship, can be especially hard.
It is. And there's even more than that. Aggression, impulsivity. Sometimes it can become dangerous because the adults can become violent. And I think it is a lot for anyone to wrap their mind around when you're talking about conversations that didn't exist. It's almost like that individual is kind of resorting back to, kind of more primitive toddler-like behavior with tantrums and outbursts and forgetfulness. It's a shock to anybody who goes through it. A lot of times, especially if they're still going like this and getting back to a baseline, there is still a part of them that realizes this is not right.
Yeah. And there's no way of measuring how long you have with them in that lucid state once the decline starts. I mean,
so, it's terrifying for people.
It's tough, but some early stuff that Dr. Laura Purdy is advising, get early input on a doctor that you trust or early on. And the earlier that you have the input, the better. Kevin McCullough with Dr. Laura Purdy coming right back. Don't go away.
Stick around for more of That Kevin next. That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.